Flint Township Police, anybody in here? Oh, Jesus. There's a little kid. Yep. Hey, buddy.
We have new information on a case that is as disgusting as it is heart-wrenching. This mom is under arrest for allegedly leaving her 2 special needs kids in a house of horror. And just wait until I tell you how long she allegedly left the young boys alone in a situation that police say could have been deadly. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. You never know what's going on behind closed doors, and in some ways, in some of the worst ways. Today's story is an example of that. But we're also learning that neighbors were concerned about what was happening long before police were called to a home in Flint, Michigan. All right, I want you to take a look at this newly released body camera video. This is what police officers in Flint Township, Michigan saw when they entered this home. And it is hard to put into words what they saw. The mom, her name is Krystal Farmer, and I'm going to freeze this video here so you can just take a look at what officers are seeing in the kitchen of this house. There appears to be trash everywhere. There's some sort of green substance, looks like paint on the fridge and on the cabinets. Furniture's broken, and that is just the beginning. Now, this is what the house looks like on the outside. It is hard to know what was going on inside the house just from looking at it from the outside. The reason that police were called, though, and they discovered this was because a concerned neighbor called 911.
It's going to be for a general evaluation of 2-3-year-old children.
Now, that's the call a dispatcher put out after receiving that 911 call to emergency responders to get to this house, because it wasn't just a hoarder situation or an abandonment situation. There are children involved, and this is the moment that officers make that terrible discovery inside the home.
Flint Township Police, anybody in here? Oh, Jesus. There's a little kid. Yep. Hey, buddy. Kid's back here in the bathroom. Check that other room.
I got a kid down in here. I got a kid back here.
Are they okay?
No. Hey, buddy. Hey. Hi. Hey. What the?
This is... Jesus, where you at?
Now, I blurred out what police say is feces on the wall to this house at the height of the 2 boys who they found inside. On top of that, the home is reportedly just covered with trash that the officers had to almost wade their way through to try to get to the young boys, who they discovered because they could just hear their voices calling for help. One of the boys is 5 years old. The other is just 4 years old. I mean, these kids are pretty much toddlers going through this. Police say they were left alone, and police also say there was not a parent or adult or guardian in sight.
We got 2 kids, one's completely naked and the other one's covered in... Would you mind getting a couple safety blankets so we can get them wrapped up in the cars? Let's get one coming to check them out.
Buddy, come here. Hey.
Hey, buddy, where's Mommy and Daddy at?
Now, you can see also here as officers make their way to the bathroom that the water there is just running and it's overflowing in the sink. The furniture looks broken. There's like a mattress flipped over. Clothes are everywhere. But perhaps this is the most heartbreaking line in the description that Flint Township police put out with this body camera video. Quote, "One child was found trying to eat raw, spoiled meat, not out of defiance, but because hunger cannot wait, and it does not understand neglect. The other was curled up on the bedroom floor trying to make themselves small in the absence of care, instead of tucked safely into the bed that had been left vacant. A silent image of vulnerability, fear, and the need for protection that was nowhere to be found."
1707. Yeah, can you start this way?
What is the number of occupants across ages?
We've got 2 small children inside, approximately
Around
3 and 1.
probably 4.
Hey, buddy, what's that?
I got Cheese getting them some blankets. We're gonna pop them in the car.
You want to go out the front door?
Whatever's gonna be closest to the cars, because they don't have any shoes or anything. Hey, buddy, can you follow my partner? Can you follow my partner out that way?
It is so hard when you watch this, not just to realize the conditions that these boys were allegedly left in, but you just hear their voices crying out for help. And that truly breaks your heart. And you also just hear the officers coming to grips with what they have discovered inside this home. You know, their voices trying to comfort these young kids just 4 and 5 years old. And when you watch this, you ask yourself, how does a home get to this point? How long were these kids left like this? And the question that just lingers is, where are their parents? Now, according to police, they believe that the boys were left alone inside this house in these conditions for days. And these boys were doing everything they could to survive. It is unclear at this point specifically just how many days police believe that these boys were left alone. As for their parents, it appears that only their mom was in charge of them before she allegedly walked away and left these boys there to fend for themselves. Here is her mugshot. Her name is Krystal Farmer. We found a Facebook page for Krystal Farmer where she goes by the name Crystal Rose. In this page, pictures from years ago, they do give off the image that she's this loving mom for her kids. But then when you watch this body camera video and you see the condition of the home that she left and the fact that she allegedly left those kids alone to fend for themselves, boys with special needs, you wonder if all of that was just a charade. Both boys, according to police, again, have special needs. And police say if they had been left alone any longer, they could have died. These 2 boys, roughly the age of toddlers at 4 and 5, left alone fighting to survive. Now, it's unclear what Krystal Farmer's side of the story is, why she allegedly left these boys alone, allegedly abandoned these boys in a home that was just in the most disgusting condition as possible. Police tracked her down and they have hit her with some major charges. Farmer is facing 2 counts of child abandonment, 2 counts of second-degree child abuse, 2 counts of second-degree child abuse in the presence of another child, and 1 count of lying to a peace officer during a violent crime investigation. All of those are felonies. Now, we haven't heard from police what Farmer allegedly told them to get that lying to a peace officer charge. We have requested the full body camera video from the day that police responded to this home, and we have also reached out to see if we can get the interrogation video to just see the interactions that Farmer had with police after they made this discovery in her home. There's obviously never an excuse for a story like this, for a home to be in that condition, and certainly a condition with children involved who were just left alone, according to police. But the prosecutor on this case told MLive.com that Farmer may suffer from mental health issues, and that is something that they're going to look into. Now, as far as her criminal history, I found a couple previous cases involving Farmer in court in Genesee County, Michigan. That's where Flint is. And one is a custody case from 2022. The other was from 2017 when she was sentenced to probation in a case where she was charged with larceny of a building. But in the case we're talking about today, this true house of horrors, Farmer was held on a $64,000 cash bond, and she is next due in court March 5th. It's hard to find good in stories like this, but clearly the officers who entered this home look to have handled the boys with care in a way that you hope an adult would. But also, if there is a hero in this story, it may be that neighbor who called 911, who said that they had suspicions about something awful that was happening inside of the home, and they picked up the phone and they made the call. Join us now to talk more about this case is retired NYPD Detective Tom Smith, also the co-host of the Gold Shield Show. Always great to have you on Law and Crime, even for stories like this, which just, whether you're a parent or not, just like hearing the kids' voices is just so hard. When you realize it's hard to even call it a mess that they were in. It's so much worse than that. But just what was your reaction? I'm sure, having seen some very difficult things in your career, just your reaction watching the roughly 3 minutes of body cam video that the Flint Township Police Department released.
It is heartbreaking, as always, whenever stories like this come out, because the most vulnerable little ones in this world who don't know the difference between right and wrong, good or bad or whatever, have to endure something like that. And that's the first thing that comes to mind, is these kids even having the thought that this is normal, because they don't know any different. And that's what's sad. And I think the officers on the body cam that I saw, Chris, did a absolute magnificent job, because you can't get emotional. You can't get mad. You can't get upset, because the kids are going to see that. So they stayed calm, walked through the house, talking to them like little kids, to get them to understand that they were there to help and to get them out of there. And I think they did a great job in an absolute horrible situation.
Yeah, and that stood out to me too, because I think of these officers when they responded. You go into this house, you don't know what you're prepared for. You don't know what could be there. I mean, it could be a very dangerous situation that you need to go, draw your weapon and be prepared for that. But then, this officer comes across this child and he has this moment where he's like, oh, Jesus, so something like that. But then you just notice like the tone of their voices, where it was like the bedside demeanor they had and the way that they flipped on a switch like that. I mean, obviously, as like, if you're a parent and like, how to talk to little kids, but like, what type of training do you go through to prepare for situations like this? Because I'm sure, sadly, for as shocking as this is, it's not the first time that you've seen a child in situations like this, where you kind of learn a way to communicate with kids in these situations.
Yeah, there's not a lot of training that prepares you for that. I don't care what academy you're in. I don't care what you're going through. That's all about just being a human being and being comforting to kids in a given situation. And whether you're a father or not, your father man instincts are going to come out, and you're going to be comforting. And that's what they were. But, in the academy and stuff like that, you go through scenarios, and role-playing situations that you get somewhat trained on. But when you're doing those, it's not real, but you're trying to do your best to get trained in a certain way. And when it comes to something like this, it's kind of like, Chris, your shield, your uniform kind of takes a side, route, and you just become, a human being and comforting to someone like these kids that was needed at that point.
Yeah, and you could definitely tell that these officers seem to really handle things the right way in what is just an impossible situation. When it comes to the investigation part of this, because Krystal Farmer is facing several felonies for allegedly leaving these kids for days inside this house. And it's easy to look and say, throw all these throw these charges at her, but like, you'll need evidence for each one of these charges. Like, when you're dealing with like an abandonment, neglect, hoarding situation like what we have here, like, how do you even build a case when there is just so much mess around you the entire time you're inside this house?
Yeah, you're going to just methodically go through each thing along with the district attorney or whoever, the prosecuting team is. And you're going to somewhat have a checklist. All right, we got this, we got this, we got this. And you're just going to go down a list of charges that you can throw at her. But then it all has to be corroborated. The body cam is a great tool that they're going to use. They're going to get interviews and do many, many interviews, schools, neighbors, family members, all of that, to get another line of a motive for this, which is, I can't imagine one. But everyone's allowed their day in court. They're allowed a defense. I don't know what the defense team in her case is going to come up with. It kind of seems indefensible what she did, but they'll come up with something. But, are they going to have a plea deal? Who knows? But just to answer your question, Chris, it's just a methodical list that you're going to go through And then every charge you're going to have, you're going to back it up with some sort of evidence or corroborating statements or whatever.
Because I know that we've talked before, and we'll talk about a murder case or something like that, where the motive is kind of a nice to have. You don't necessarily need it if you have the forensics. But in a case like this, and I don't know what her side to the story is, what was going on in her life. Not that that would make an excuse for everything that we see in this body cam video. But when you're dealing with a case like this, an abandonment case, like how much does that why matter when it comes to building a case against this person?
Well, the why matters because in this case, you're going to build a story, of what happened and what led up to this. And the neglect, there may be stories and neglectful situations that happen before this, with schools or family members mentioning it. So you're going to build up a story of where this started and where it happened and why. Because if they happen to go to a trial, that's what you're going to play to the jury. Juries grab stories because it builds up the motive of what the inevitable end of this was. And that's a big deal for jurors. They don't like, all right, it's just this, black and white. They like to feel the story and the motive behind something. So the prosecution team is going to build a timeline, and they're going to build kind of a storyboard of what happened in this case to present in court.
I thought it was interesting. The prosecutor on this case, it was mlive.com, which is the paper that covers like Michigan and Flint and Detroit, said that, mental health issues may be at play here when it comes to Krystal Farmer. And when you look at the house, it's like, yeah, on the outside, like you would be like, I would assume that someone would have to be mentally ill to leave their home in this scenario. But in terms of the law, like, what would that actually mean? And I know, like, and turning back to like some of the murder cases we cover, it's like the person didn't realize what they were doing. Like in a case like this, how does that come into play with what, as you're building a case as an investigator, knowing that the defense might bring something up like that?
Oh yeah, and they're going to, and you're spot on. That's what they're going to go towards. But that leads to what I was saying about interviews. When you get people that know her and have been around her, can corroborate that, nope, she was good, she did this every day, she did this every day, and then they try the mental health angle, that might not work. But these are conversations that are going to take place behind, the courtroom scene with DAs and defense attorneys and doctors and psychologists and all that are going to come together with this of figuring out the best, ruling in this. To take a plea for X amount of years, a mental health issue is certainly going to be part of that. But when it comes to what happened in this, it's going to depend on her past, digging into her past and what she's been like from the time before having kids to having kids and all that. So it becomes a big picture, Chris, when it comes to prosecuting them.
Because I also think of like, if there's a hero in this story, it's this neighbor that called 911 that just felt like something wasn't right with this house. Because when you look at the house from the outside, it seems like a very typical, normal house. And then you go inside and it's just this moment, like your eyes just watching this video, and then you hear the kid's voice, and it's, so thankful that this person called 911, because imagine if officers did not get to this house in time, it could have been a much, much worse story. How much investigating though goes on into figuring out like how this was able to happen, like the hoarding part of it, and then also the neglect part of it with the kids, where she allegedly abandons the kids, like, and whether someone else knew that these kids were in the house. Like how much work is actually done on the outside, not just with Krystal Farmer, but other people making sure that somebody knew what was going on here.
Oh yeah, there'll be a team of detectives going and doing interviews on every aspect of this woman's life. Her neighbors, her family, if she had a job, her work, people she worked with, that's all going to play into this. And along the line, then they're going to dive into it. Were any other reports done? Was there something missed? Did something slip through the cracks on the state level or local level when it came to checking on these kids? Their school, anything like that. That's all going to be part of this, because you hope that someone didn't drop the ball on this and get notified of this earlier and didn't act the right way. And it took a neighbor to do this, and thankfully that neighbor stepped up. And I say it all the time, and we've had this conversation, Chris, that, when you have a gut feeling about something, 99% of the time you're going to be right. So to make that next step and make that call and call the authorities, and she saved these kids' lives. She absolutely did, without a doubt, because what you said, the end of this without the response of the police would have been a catastrophic ending to this.
Yeah, and police have said it was days that these kids were in this condition. They haven't said how many days, but just some of the details are just so bad. You look at this body cam too, and I think anybody can look at this and see that this is not an okay situation to be in. I mean, even the water is still going. So it was like the faucet was turned on and they just kept it going. There's the reports of feces on the wall, trash is everywhere. I don't even know how a home gets into this state. At the same time, like, it is a free country and people can live how they want. I know people who are very messy. I know some people who are incredibly clean. But what is the bar in the eyes of the law when a situation gets to a point where you can charge someone for being, whether it's a hoarding situation or an alleged neglect situation like this?
Well, no one in the law cares what your house looks like. The bottom line in this is those children and the neglect that they felt and had to suffer through is the level you're looking at. Conditions of the house, like you just said, people have habits, people have things that they do in their own house, got it. But when that leads to a dangerous situation for children and putting their lives in danger, and that's exactly what this was. If this was days, Chris, like is being reported, they probably only had a couple of days left, before something really tragic happened with them. And that's where the level is. All the rest of it with the way the house looks and all that compounds it, yes, and will be brought up in the neglect part of the prosecution. But the focus is law-wise and charges-wise, those children and what they had to endure.
Yeah, it's so awful to think about, and then you also think about, like, here's, Krystal Farmer. She's been arrested, facing several charges. I don't know what the situation is, with the boy's father, but what happens to the kids now? I mean, these are two kids, 4 or 5 years old. They have special needs. They didn't really clarify more on those issues, but certainly they require a special kind of care, and they've been through this terrible situation. Like, what is the likelihood? What is the future of these kids look like? Who's going to take care of them?
Yep. Initially, because of just the way laws are, they're going to try to reach out to a family member first and see what the family structure is outside of this woman, in a safe home for these children. And if that doesn't work, there's many foster parents that are out there that I know will grab them immediately and try to provide a loving home for them. But it's going to start with a family extension and who knows them and can take care of them. And if that doesn't work in the eyes of the court, they'll go to a foster system, and then they'll understand what being loved is all about, because these kids don't know what the other side of life looks like, and hopefully someone can provide that for them.
Yeah, you really hope so. From a criminal case side of it, I mean, 4 and 5 years old. I mean, how could they factor into, they're so young, but they were the ones who were the real victims in this story because they were in the house. Like, how do you go about, their role potentially in a prosecution of their mom?
Well, they're going to get talked to. They're going to get quote unquote interviewed, by a highly skilled professional who is going to take their time talking to them. But they will be asked questions about, what does mom do when she's home? What is, just a series of childlike questions will be asked of them, because that's part of it. And that will give kind of an insight into what's going on. Don't underestimate kids, not you, Chris, but anyone.
Yeah.
They are sometimes a wealth of information about, especially, a 5-year-old can really lay out, what's going on and what's been going on very thoughtfully. So, that could lead to a whole nother opening when it comes to this case.
Yeah, anyone with young kids, they have minds that sometimes are sharper than their parents, for sure, and can remember things that you forget about. And we'll see how they factor into this case. Just a really tough body camera video to watch. Retired NYPD Detective Tom Smith. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.